Here's what's coming up on the program. Taliban officials report a major row broke out between leaders of the Taliban days after they set up an interim government in Afghanistan. The EU Commission President steers the bloc in the direction of building forces as good as that of the United States. Plus, North and South Korea test ballistic missiles hours apart of each other. A warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. Thank you for joining us. I am Amarachi Ubani. The Taliban is discovering the forming a government and rule in a country are no easy tasks. One senior official is reported to have told the BBC that a major row broke out between militant group leaders just days after it announced a new government, declaring Afghanistan to now be known as an Islamic Emirate. The argument appeared to center on who did the most to secure victory over the United States and how power was divided up in the new cabinet. Though the Taliban has denied the argument, a senior Taliban member based in Qatar and a person connected to those involved also confirmed that an argument had taken place late last week. Sources said the argument broke out because Taliban co-founder Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, who is the new prime minister, wasn't happy about the structure of their interim government. The row also reportedly stemmed from divisions over who in the Taliban should take credit for their victory in Afghanistan. Mr. Baradar reportedly believes that the emphasis should be placed on diplomacy carried out by people like him, while members of the Haqqani group, which is run by one of the most senior Taliban figures, and their backers say it was achieved through fighting. Meanwhile, it's been 1 month since the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, and some residents in the capital, Kabul, say peace has returned to the country and that the people are satisfied despite some minor dissatisfaction. A cross-section of respondents say no one has had any complaints. A lot of the problems have been resolved, and others said they are witnessing peace and that the city has been rid of thieves and robbers. Yet another said great changes come, the cost of governance is low and things are running smoothly. But there was a slight complaint about the banking system. The United States and Western countries have been trying to balance not recognizing the Taliban government as against accepting some sort of relation still needs to take place between them. The EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the bloc should seek to beef up its military capabilities to confront security threats and global crisis. She was addressing the EU Parliament today, whom she told she believed EU military forces would be part of the solution. The EU has historically relied on the US-NATO alliance for military action, and after the Afghan pull-out, the EU needed the political will to intervene militarily without US-led NATO. She says it's time for Europe to step up to the next level.
We did it together, but there's simply no security and defense issue where less cooperation is the answer. So we need to invest in our joint partnership and draw on each side's unique strength. And this is why we are working with Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg on a new EU-NATO joint declaration to be presented before the end of the year. But this is only one part of the equation. Europe can and clearly should be able and willing to do more on its own. Honourable members, the work on the European health. In the last weeks, there have been many discussions on expeditionary forces, on what type and how many we need, battle groups and EU entry forces. This is no doubt part of the debate, and I think it will be part of the solution. But the more fundamental issue is why this has not worked in the past.
Let's turn to North Korea now, which fired 2 ballistic missiles across its east coast. A first test with such missiles in 6 months and a fresh breach of UN resolutions. The short-range missiles flew around 800 kilometers at a maximum altitude of 60 kilometers. It flew east towards the Sea of Japan. Japan's defense minister later said the missiles landed inside Japan's exclusive economic zone. Interestingly, South Korea tested its first submarine-launched ballistic missile hours after the North's, known as SLBM. The South's missile test, it says, was not in reaction to the North's latest launches, but it does make South Korea the 7th country in the world with such technology. President Moon Jae-in, the South's president, says South Korea now has sufficient deterrence to respond to the North's provocations at any time, urging South Korea to continue increasing its weapons program to overwhelm North Korea's asymmetric power. On the side of the missile test, China's State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi met South Korea's president and Foreign Minister Chung Eui-yong in Seoul today for 2 days of talks over North Korea's recent missile tests and stalled denuclearization negotiations between Pyongyang and Washington. Now, Wang has asked for further cooperation to expand common interests and more quickly, stably, and fully strengthen diplomatic ties, which mark their 30th anniversary next year. Chung vowed to continue fostering peace with the North, expressing hopes that the upcoming Winter Olympics could provide a chance to kickstart the efforts. We have Foreign Affairs analyst Calvin Dark joining us now from Washington. Calvin, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Now, when I first read about the story about North Korea's test of ballistic missiles this morning, I saw then the U.S. and its allies were not worried about it, only to read hours later South Korea had also tested its first submarine-launched ballistic missiles. Clearly, there is some tension going on with the missile test and a message passed by both neighbors. Apart from the North, where we're used to, you think South Korea's actions had a global message as well?
Yes, I think they do. I think that, as they stated, their planned tests were to show that they had weaponry that could be a deterrent to North Korea. And I believe that the high-level Chinese officials were there as well, and that went to show that they are also trying to cooperate with power players in the region. So, yes, I do think they're making a very international statement about South Korea, that is, about how prepared it is to defend itself.
Do you think it has any impact on the North? You know, there have been times in the past when South Korea and U.S. forces would carry out military exercises, and the North would also warn them, sometimes firing shots and sometimes targeting some of those military aircrafts as they flew over. You think that the message has been received by the North?
Well, yeah, and I think that there are several reasons behind what North Korea did. One, to do it while the Chinese delegation was in South Korea was a way to show that, you know, while they obviously may be listening to the Chinese as their, biggest ally and partner in this from the North Korean side, that they weren't afraid to, show their muscle, so to speak. And it was also to demonstrate, and this is something that I thought about a lot. This past weekend, over September 11th here in the United States, the 20th anniversary, we were in a very heightened mode of just thinking about our domestic security and international security. And I think North Korea played into that to show, or at least to show the United States, possibly to South Korea and its neighbors, that they could still be a threat. Now, how credible that is, that remains to be seen, but that would surely fit into what North Korea has done in the past.
So the United States appears not bothered in the face of the tests by North Korea. Why do you think that is?
I think behind the scenes, they are probably bothered in that they are, they definitely don't want North Korea to develop a weapon that could reach the U.S. or reach U.S. allies. But the Biden administration also wants to develop and portray a stark contrast from the Trump administration. I know it seems like ages ago, but remember, the last presidential administration met with Kim Jong, the North Koreans, Kim Jong-un several times, and even crossing over in the demilitarized zone. So the Biden administration is really trying to demonstrate that they're negotiating, but they're not going to give them a platform like Biden's predecessor.
Indeed, I see that. President Biden has hardly responded to anything North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has said or done. And quite frankly, yes, the missile test may be a call to attention to North Korea. But if there ever was to be a meeting, Calvin, what do you think the negotiating terms will be?
Well, I think that unlike the Trump administration, the Biden administration has made clear that with North Korea, that there have to be demonstrable steps towards denuclearization before they will have a productive conversation on, reducing the sanctions and kind of introducing them into the international community. Another dynamic, though, that's happened since the last time former President Trump met with the North Koreans is COVID-19. We know that obviously that's affected the whole world, and we don't know the extent to which it's affected North Korea because they haven't really been upfront about that. So I think that before anything happens between the Biden administration and North Korea of substance, North Korea, despite what they say they won't do, has to demonstrate some progress on denuclearization.
Calvin, thanks for staying with me. Just one more question before I let you go. Once again, we're seeing China playing those games, those mind games, with the North and the South. It's clear that China is an ally to the North, but here you see the Chinese administration cozying up to South Korea. Do you think there's a possible alliance going on there?
I don't know if it's an alliance, but as I was reading about that, one thing I definitely know for sure is China is investing in the strategic long haul. That is to say, they want to make sure that wherever they are invested, be it with the South Koreans, North Koreans, with the Japanese, that they want to be a vital player in the region. Why? Because that gives them more leverage in other negotiations with the United States and others. So I think China is being strategic to show the United States that they can be of help and maybe not of help in these negotiations with North Korea, depending on how the U.S. deals with them on other issues.
National interest above all. Calvin, thank you again for speaking with me on The World Today.
Thank you.
While China is playing mediator between North and South Korea, its armed forces have concluded a first multinational joint peacekeeping drill, showing off their combat prowess with drones and armored vehicles, while seeking to project a more benign image of the country's military. Around 1,000 troops from China, Pakistan, Mongolia, and Thailand participated in the 10-day exercise at a People's Liberation Army training base in Zhoumadian in the central province of Henan, though most of the soldiers appear to be Chinese. The exercise, codenamed Shared Destiny 2021, underscored China's position as a staunch defender of world peace and international order. That's according to one of the military experts who was there on the training ground. The soldiers, in front of a small group of invited journalists, enacted firefights between terrorists and peacekeepers in strife-torn fictitious country of Karana. Exercise was meant to be a showcase of Chinese military hardware also, of foreign troops trained using Chinese weaponry and military equipment. 9 Hong Kong pro-democracy activists have been sentenced to between 6 and 10 months in prison for taking part in an unauthorized assembly at last year's vigil for the victims of China's 1989 Tiananmen Square crackdown on protesters. The last 2 Tiananmen vigils were banned by police, citing coronavirus restrictions on public gatherings. However, coming after the mass pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong in 2019, the ban was seen by many activists as an attempt to shut down any display of defiance to Beijing. Hong Kong authorities denied that was the reason. Despite the ban, thousands turned up to light candles across the city in 2020, and smaller crowds did the same this year. 3 other activists received suspended sentences, all 12 of them, including veteran vigil organizer Albert Ho, former lawmaker Eddie Chu, and Figo Chan, a former leader of the Civil Human Rights Front, known for organizing large-scale pro-democracy rallies, all pleaded guilty. Still watching The World Today, we have more stories coming up. Plus, there's joy and surprise guests as Broadway's big musicals return. Stay with us. Welcome back to The World Today. With politics now in the UK, it was Prime Minister's Questions Day in Parliament today. And Boris Johnson rebuffed opposition Labour leader Keir Starmer's criticism of a tax rise on workers as absolutely ridiculous. Last week, the Prime Minister outlined what he described as a new health and social care levy that will see the rate of national insurance payroll taxes paid by both workers and employers rise by 1.25 percentage points, with the same increase also applied to the tax on shareholder dividends. He said the increases would raise £36 billion over 3 years.
Mr. Speaker, an unfair tax rise which won't fix social care and won't clear the NHS backlog is not a plan, Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister pretends he's no alternative but to hammer working people with tax rises and universal credit cuts. But that's not true. His approach means that a working single parent who's a qualified nurse would lose £1,143. A supermarket worker could lose £1,093. So why is the Prime Minister choosing to take a tax system that's already loaded against working people and making it even more unfair?
Mr. Speaker, it is absolutely ridiculous that he should attack the government over salaries for nurses when we put them up by 3%, Mr. Speaker, on top of the 12.8% rise that we introduced. Mr. Speaker, 1 in 10 of the people in this country is now on an NHS waiting list. They know that the NHS backlog needs to be fixed. They know that this government has a plan, and they know that Labour has got absolutely nothing to say.
The Prime Minister had a lot more to do today. He demoted his Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, and a major reshuffle, removing his more under-fire colleagues to refocus the government on raising living standards after COVID-19. After months of criticism of several of his top team for missteps and gaffes, Mr. Johnson finally started a process some say he wanted to do many weeks earlier to make the changes he feels he needs to press on with his levelling up agenda. Dominic Raab, who faced calls to resign since he went on holiday in Crete as the Taliban advanced on the Afghan capital, Kabul, lost one of the so-called great officers of state in the Foreign Office to become Justice Minister. To soften the blow, Raab was also appointed Deputy Prime Minister, a role he played in all but name when he stepped in to lead government when Johnson was fighting for his life in hospital with COVID last year. Liz Truss was promoted from trade to the Foreign Office, becoming the second woman to hold the position in Britain. Michael Gove, seen as a key player in the Johnson government, was moved to housing from his position in the Cabinet Office, a department in the centre of government which drives the implementation of policy. We continue to follow the coronavirus situation around the world as a global update.
The World Health Organization says only about 4 million coronavirus cases were reported globally last week, the first major drop in new infections in more than 2 months. In its weekly updates, the WHO says the highest numbers of new cases were reported from the US, UK, India, Iran, and Turkey. Meanwhile, the highly contagious Delta variant has been reported in 180 countries, with 6 more countries reporting it in the past week. While the global number of deaths decreased to about 62,000, with the sharpest decline in Southeast Asia, Africa recorded a 7% increase. China has imposed lockdowns and expanded mass testing as the latest outbreak in its Fujian province continues to spread. Fujian province reported new local infections for the 5th consecutive day, with 50 cases over the past 24 hours. Some cities have restricted travel as a highly contagious Delta variant spreads through the region.
With the European Green Deal,
In her second State of the Union address, the European Union's chief executive, Ursula von der Leyen, says the pace of vaccination against COVID-19 must be quickened to avert a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
While we have every reason to be confident, we have no reason to be complacent. Our first and most urgent priority is to speed up global vaccination. With less than 1% of global doses administered in low-income countries, the scale of injustice and the level of urgency is obvious. This is one of the great geopolitical issues in our time. So let's do everything possible that this does not turn into a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
She also vowed to donate another 200 million COVID-19 vaccine jabs to non-EU countries. And finally, Portugal has fully inoculated 80% of its population against the coronavirus, becoming one of the world's most vaccinated nations as authorities gradually drop most COVID-19 restrictions. The southern European nation, which at the start of this year battled what was then the world's worst coronavirus surge, has vaccinated around 8.2 million people out of its population of just over 10 million. Everyone above the age of 12 is eligible to receive the vaccine in Portugal.
It's good to see me, isn't it?
More than a dozen Broadway musicals and plays are opening this September after the longest shutdown in the history of New York's theater district. The 18-month-long pandemic closures threw hundreds of actors, musicians, and dancers out of work along with stage crews. Broadway's biggest musicals roared back to life on Tuesday, replacing the eerie silence of the last 18 months in New York's pandemic-hit theater district with screams, tears, and, of course, standing ovations. Emotions very giddy, as you can see there. The curtains rose again on top musicals Hamilton, The Lion King, and Wicked before packed audiences welcoming back live theatre after the shutdown. Audiences, actors, musicians, backstage crew must provide full proof, however, of full vaccinations, and they must wear masks. Following comments from some of them on how it feels to be back.
To get to come here tonight, like being a resident of New York, and to see this, it's such a blessing.
I can't even explain that feeling. Like sitting there, the energy was just like amped up, and like having Steven Schwartz here and like all the original creatives, it was insane.
Oh my gosh, it's so incredible, and I think, it just shows the magic and just how powerful theater can be, and how, this whole thing has just felt like a huge family reunion with people that I don't even know, but that just shows like how powerful the theater community is, and I'm just so grateful that everyone is back. It was incredible. Oh my gosh, it was totally memorable for me. I'm going to remember it forever.
Oh, it was insane. Like, there was a standing ovation before the show even began, and like a standing ovation after the show, and then everyone was clapping after like every scene. The energy was insane.
It was incredible to be here and just be surrounded by everyone, and I didn't think I would be so emotional, but you really felt everything in such a different way coming back and being back on Broadway. It was amazing.
It sure feels good to be back. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.